let's start with the simple questions, simple steps. Let's define the first step of the founder who are ready to expand globally, with this here startup and look into the US as a primary market.
Thank you very much. And Mikhail, it's an honor to meet you. I'm a startup lawyer and I help companies here in the Silicon Valley get foreign finance scaled and growth. What we often find is that the concept of Silicon Valley is really global. It's not a local phenomenon anymore. And so we end up finding a lot of companies that have built amazing intellectual property, disruptive technology, and really all they need from Silicon Valley is money. So they will come to the United States, probably to the Silicon Valley or San Francisco. They'll probably form a Delaware C corporation. They will probably drop their, they'll put that Delaware C corporation on top of where they are in Russia or elsewhere. And leave that company completely intact. And the shareholders of the local Russian entity will flip up to the Delaware entity. And so that is a tried and true formula that we often find ourselves doing. But those are not the only choices, Mikhail, and we're gonna get into that. But your question to me is, when is the right time? And the right time is when you have brought your technology to market and you have really established a product market fit. And so that's when you have not only eyeballs to show if you're an e-commerce company, but you're probably recognizing revenue, and you have some background of, or pardon me, some history of traction over, some number of quarters. How many quarters is it? 1, 2, 3. It's probably a year of revenue in your home country, and then I think you have something to show to investors. And really the magic formula that investors are looking for is a 40% gross margin, an enormous amount of growth, whatever it is, and some revenue that they can say, that really proves the product market fit, whatever it is. I hope that answered your questions, Mikhail.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and what will be the next steps? Okay, I'm ready. So I have a revenue, I have a great traction, 1-year traction, and what are the next steps? I heard about the, the Delaware C Corp. I heard about the Wyoming. What the difference? What should I, or LLC company? What should I choose and why?
Great question. So in the United States, the governance of companies does not happen at the federal level. It happens at each of the 50 local states. And so we have, I would say, 3 states that are extremely well, that do a very good job of trying to attract companies by having a very advanced legislation for companies that helps businesses and is designed to attract them, and that have a judiciary of appointed judges who take it upon themselves to continue to make the state a good place for business. And so Delaware is by far the leading state for both of its legislation and its judiciary, and really for being able to, sorry, it's early in the morning, for entrepreneurs to feel comfortable that they can make decisions and that the responses will be very predictable, which is what you want in business. You want to make decisions that are clear and that clearly take you here or there. And so Delaware is the #1 jurisdiction. Wyoming has become an up-and-coming jurisdiction for digital currency companies, as they have a legislation that I think as far surpasses the other states in that respect. And it's also a low tax jurisdiction. So Wyoming is a place if you're a digital currency company. Nevada has been trying for the last 50 years to supplant Delaware as the state where companies should go to get formed, but it has a long way to go. And with a history of gambling and other things, it has a bit of a how shall I say? It has a bit of a polish to it that Delaware doesn't. And so I continue to recommend Delaware as the place to go. Now, you may ask then, what is the right form of company? You hear about C Corp, you hear about S Corp, you hear about limited liability company, partnership, all sorts of entities. And really for foreign entrepreneurs, non-US entrepreneurs, people from around the world coming to the US, they're probably going to look right away to the Delaware C Corp because it's an entity that puts all of the liability in a box, so it shields you from personal liability. And it also it is a box where only the activity within that entity is what is picked up by US legislation. And so therefore, your subsidiary in your home country in its revenues should not be picked up by the Delaware C Corp, unless of course you're selling it, your Russian company, for example, in Russia is selling into the US, and then in that case, a whole different discussion needs to happen. But Mikhail, the Delaware C Corporation finally is the ideal entity because it blocks the passage of revenue or gains above it. So the stockholders do not automatically need to declare and pay taxes on revenue that isn't paid out to the stockholders. So it blocks taxes. And investors require that because investors, venture capital firms, et cetera, do not want to be receiving a tax form saying that they have phantom income or phantom loss. They want to be able to determine the time that they receive gain, which is when the company is sold.
Wow. So, and how do investors, I mean, venture capital investors, look on the, the type of incorporation? So they choose only C Corp, or, there is a legend that it doesn't matter how your corporation looks like. Only your product matters. So is it true, or the type of entity is really makes sense?
I think that's really a great question, Mikhail. And I think 10 years ago we would have told you that you absolutely had to have a Delaware C Corp, or you would be laughed out of the room and ignored. And today, I think venture investors are increasingly competing amongst themselves by their ability and their willingness to reach out to places beyond this small Silicon Valley and go to the hinterlands of the United States, especially during this pandemic, and abroad. We saw more U.S. investment into Europe in the last year than we have ever before. So I do not think that it is true that you need a Delaware C Corp to raise money and attract investment. You are absolutely right, Mikhail, that the critical sine qua non of attracting attention for investment is your product market fit, the quality of the team, and the market size and market opportunity. So Spotify was not grown in New York. It only came to New York to become a public company, and it never did it form a Delaware C Corp that I recall. So there will be many more companies that do a great job of raising money without ever coming to the United States.
Okay, but as I know, the raising money in C Corp is the easiest way, to raise money. Is I'm right? Because we can use safe or convertible loans. Or something.
Great question. So there are three ways that companies, or three instruments that companies use to raise money once you formed a Delaware C Corp, which I shouldn't mislead anyone into thinking isn't the easiest way to raise money from venture capitalists. Venture capitalists will be most comfortable with the Delaware C Corp, and they'll be most comfortable if you, the founders, are here in the Silicon Valley, meeting with them quarterly and developing customers within big tech, and hopefully developing sources of supply, channel distribution, whatever it is. We think it's a great ecosystem. But back to your question, what are the instruments by which Delaware C Corps raise funds? And those would be the convertible note, the safe, and of course preferred stock. So I'm going to take those in order. When you're a startup, it is the absolute worst time to raise money, and that's because you are valued at the lowest. You're the weakest. You haven't yet demonstrated your true value. You haven't yet fundamentally disrupted a market. And so the idea that you would sell stock and shares of ownership in your company, the deck is stacked against you. And so the convertible note is designed to say, you know what, give me a loan, and then that loan will convert into equity only when I have raised a pot of, say, $5 million of Series A preferred stock, which is later on down the road when I'm going to be valued at a much higher number. And then you say to the holder of that loan, in exchange for you agreeing to convert later at a higher price, I'll give you a discount off of that higher price, let's say 20% is standard, and I'll pay you interest for the time it takes for me to raise that preferred round, so that I, the company, have skin in the game to get that round raised faster. So that's the convertible note, tried and true mechanism for raising funds. Somewhere around 8 years ago, founders were doing really well, and they got together at an accelerator called Y Combinator, and they said, you know, this isn't fair, because investors say don't raise so much money, so we don't, and then the convertible note stays outstanding longer, and more interest accrues, and the discount is huge. There's a cap on value, and I, the entrepreneur, get screwed. And there's a maturity date, and sometimes these notes are secured and I have to pay these people back. It's a disaster. And so my friends Jonathan and Carolyn Levy came up with the simple agreement for future equity, or SAFE. And really they took the convertible note and they said, it's not there. There's no requirement to pay it back. There's no maturity date, and there's no interest rate. Typically, there still is a discount to conversion, and oftentimes there's a cap on the value, but it's a much founder-friendlier piece of paper than the convertible note. Now, 5 years ago, I used to hear when I would go to the East Coast or somewhere in Europe, you know, that funny SAFE thing, that's a Silicon Valley monster. We don't want it. We want a convertible note if we were an investor. And nowadays, I find SAFEs being used all over the world. I find them used in South America, Asia, Africa, and of course, they've become ubiquitous in Europe. And so it's a really good way to raise money if you're an equity holder. Pardon me, if you're a company. And the third way to raise money is the preferred stock. Preferred stock gives a value on your company. So if you're ready for that discussion, it's the instrument to choose. But it also has preferences for the holders. So it is a piece of paper that allows the investor to get their money back before the founder. Typically, it will have some sort of a dividend that accrues over time. It will have voting rights. It will allow the investors to put a person on your board of directors. So when you do sell preferred stock and you have a priced round, you are going to lose some bit of control. And you know what I do when my founders are raising money in the preferred is I try and say to them, okay, so we're raising X. How long does that take us? When do we need to raise the next round? And what is your pro forma ownership of the company going to be after this round of capital that you raise? And what is it going to be when you raise the next round? And oftentimes I find that founders are stunned at how much control they're going to lose. One, because those convertible notes or safes that have been outstanding for so long are going to convert, and they're going to dilute the founder only and not the new investor. But then, you know, when you're 2 years out after the preferred round, your Series A, you got to go raise a Series B. And what does that look like? And I'm finding that at each round is an opportunity to really recapitalize the company and recut the deal. And we're seeing more and more that founders are going back to earlier stage investors and saying, you know, I gave you a great deal, but like the company can't survive unless you agree to new terms. So I'm seeing a lot of that, Mikhail.
Oh, it's a great story. Thanks a lot. Thanks for sharing. So, and you know, I raised my first investment round by using SAFE, and you're absolutely right. It's a great instrument for a founder and for investors, you know, from all around the world, because they just, you know, just sign the paper and just sending your money, and it's done. So everything's pretty clear and great. So, okay, my next question is, so how does the registration of entity process looks like? Should the founder present in person? Should they, you know, go to Delaware State, or, you know, what's the plan?
Oh, great question, Mikhail. So, in the United States, it's funny, Mikhail. A few years ago, there was this big scandal about the Panama Papers and how these foreign offshore islands were these foreign tax havens where it was too easy to set up shell companies and hide money. Well, let me tell you, there's no faster place than the state of Delaware to form a new company and no requirements, no showing up, no bank account, very simple and easy. In fact, Mikhail, I use a company called V Corp Services. I send them an email, and within an hour, I can have a company formed. I don't need to be there. I can appoint my dog as a director, so there's no citizenship requirements. There's no identification requirements. It is easy. You only need one director, you only need one person, and that same person can be the president, treasurer, and secretary. Very simple. It does cost a few $100. You have to pay franchise tax, which is this very strange tax that the state collects just for you to say that you are a Delaware corporation. I have a blog post on this, which I just published, I'll send to you. But it isn't income tax and it isn't sales tax. Those are the typical ways that a government taxes companies based on the amount of income it makes or the amount of sales. And this is an additional tax by just saying, hi, I'm a Delaware company, bam, I pay $1,000 a year. It's a nominal amount, Mikhail, but it is something, and that's really the only thing you've got to worry about. Now, to form a bank account in the US to collect money from investors, you will need the charter or the proof of filing of your corporation status. You'll need bylaws, which is how the company status works. You might need resolutions of the board, which appoint an individual as the person who is authorized to operate a bank account on behalf of the company. Most banks don't even want that anymore, unless the balance is large. And then an employer identification number, or an EIN. And the EIN is a document that you get by signing on a wet piece of paper, and it is the one document in the formation process that does require an actual signature. Doesn't need to be an actual blue ink. It can be it can be an electronic signature, but it does require one, and it's somebody's social security number. So the founder or your lawyer, accountant, friend, it needs to be on that demand for or request for an EIN. You get it within 24 to 48 hours, and then boom, you can open your bank account.
Wow, great. So, okay, I got it. So, and what about what about a banking account? I know that I can open I can open totally online in Mercury bank account. So just easily, just in a few days, after KYC and AML process. And for example, but there is only one bank in States where I can open, remotely account. Is that right?
Which bank is that?
Mercury Bank.
Oh, no, there's many banks where you can open an account remotely.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, sure.
There is a huge legend in Russia, very
yeah,
about it.
That's a legend. That is a legend. There were sanctions brought on by the United States government against the government of Russia in terms of moving money at various points and increased regulations. But for opening a bank account, it should not be that difficult.
Okay. So it's great. Thanks a lot. So, and what about the taxes? Some kind of should I pay something again? Okay, I opened my company entity, then I opened my banking account, and I do nothing with my company. So there is no payrolls, there is no revenue, there is no investment. Should I pay something for it?
You'll pay franchise taxes, as I was mentioning, to the state of Delaware, as well as to the state of California if you have an office here in the state of California. Oftentimes founders will form the Delaware entity and then they'll qualify that Delaware entity in California because they have an office here, and you'll pay $500 to each of the state of Delaware and California, and that's it. Now you will need to file a tax return every year, and you'll probably need to pay an accountant to go do that for you. And if you don't file that tax return, you might have difficulties in performing other functions over the course of your company's life and doing business in the United States. So that is a hassle in any jurisdiction, is filing a tax return.
Okay, great. And maybe should I hire some kind of like employees or board members, like, you know, in Singapore, I definitely should have some kind of like a local board member or something. Do I need it?
There is no requirement in the United States, in any state that I'm aware of, to have anybody physically present or to have anybody around. And as I said, you can appoint your dog as the director.
And that I definitely should do. So, right, because I have a great dog, you know, he's a really smart guy. Okay, I think I have no other question. Kate, maybe you have some, because I think it's everything is clear and sharp and really great, because Louis is just you know, absolutely great in presentation and skills, so and explaining something.
Well, it's really nice to meet you both, and Kate, if you have no other questions, I will sign off. I'll send you this presentation, which we didn't need, and I look forward to being in touch next time we're all allowed to travel.
Oh, Louis, it was so great pleasure to have you. So you're so great, guy. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for coming to, you know, our online meeting.